picture that you see here on the right and on the left, I took this picture 11 years ago. That was the view from the window of my office at the time. And when I took that picture, my head and my heart were just as foggy as the view was. I worked at a big global digital agency, and I had a really good job. I was successful, I was a director, but I felt since about, it was a year or so, that something was really off. There was something wrong. I had basically everything, and still I felt that something really essential was missing. And it wasn't just my lines, no. It was just that I suddenly realized that I actually had a so-called bullshit job. And it sounds funny, but when you realize that you actually have been doing a bullshit job for quite a long time, it was actually, for me, it was pretty painful. What was I adding to the world as a professional? When we know that there are so many challenges that we as humanity face, and those issues are really close to my heart, like social inequality. More and more people feeling disconnected. There are more and more people depressed. There's the climate crisis. We have the biodiversity crisis. And what was I doing in my work to help? Well, actually, nothing. And maybe even, I could say, on the contrary. I remember very vividly, I was in this room with 10 people, 5 people from my agency where I worked, and 5 people from my client. And my client was this big fossil fuel company. And we were discussing for at least 30 minutes whether the design for the app that we were developing, look at these corners, see the difference? You can talk about that for at least 30 minutes, of course. You want to see it again? Yep. 30 minutes, 10 people. Intelligent people, kind people, wonderful people, and me. But seriously, I remember, and I went to the restroom. Fortunately, I was alone. And I looked in the mirror, and I said to myself, Michiel, what the hell are you doing with your time and your talent? I'm really wasting it. And during that same period, one of my sons, I have 3 wonderful sons. At that time, Lucas was 9 or 10. And Lucas had to go into hospital. And he was in intensive care for a few days. And when I think of the contrast between the incredibly meaningful work that the people in the hospital did who helped Lucas to cure, and the job that I had, I mean, the contrast could not be bigger. So after several conversations with my wife and with my kids, I could only come to one conclusion. I really had to make some drastic changes. And that's when I decided that I want to dedicate myself full-time to having a positive impact. Now, in order to get there, I did something that everybody tells you not to do. So what I did is I handed in my resignation without knowing what I was gonna do next. But I needed to create this headspace, and actually that worked out really well for me. Because within 2 weeks, I knew what it is that I wanted to be doing. And that is because I had a revelation. I had this insight that I noticed how my own media diet had a huge influence on how I felt. How the news and social media that I consumed, and I consumed quite a lot, how that influenced me in a positive and in a negative way. And not just how I felt, but also how I acted. Now, before I continue, I've got a question for you. So I would like to know, there are many people who consume a lot of news and or social media. And if this applies to you, could you raise your hand? If that applies to you, if you think, well, yeah, I do consume quite a lot of news or social media, okay. Please keep that hand up. It doesn't take that long. Because my next question, it's only one follow-up question, so you should be fine. My next question is, after consuming news or social media, who actually felt a little bit better about himself? Maybe more hopeful or even inspired to do something positive? I'm officially counting 0 hands. I didn't see you. There's a lot of backlight. As one of the speakers, it doesn't count. Oh, seriously, let that sink in, huh? Because actually, I should have done this before all the hands went down. But I think there were a lot of hands up. If we think about that for a minute, let that sink in for a minute. So we watch a lot of news and social media and news. And actually, it's a little bit like we're feeding ourselves slow poison. But you've seen it, you are not alone. This is something, it's a societal problem. If you Google, the news makes me, and then we get these wonderful auto-suggestions from Google, look at these words. I mean, we can laugh about it, yes, it's funny in a way, but it's anxious, sad, cry, and depressed. So actually, it's a pretty depressing list. But it's not really surprising, is it? I mean, the majority of the news items are negative news items. And that is because media play into our evolutionary negativity bias, that is called. We are wired, we are sort of like programmed to pay more attention to negative news than to positive news. And a long time ago, when we humans were just on this planet, that really served us, it helped us to survive. But nowadays, it doesn't really help us anymore. But it's the easiest way to get a lot of clicks and a lot of eyeballs is by sharing negative news. It works. You often hear in newsrooms the motto, when it bleeds, it leads. But actually, what I like much better is what Rutger Bregman, a Dutch historian and author, said about the news. If you watch the news a lot, you know exactly how the world doesn't work, because you got this upside-down view. Because the news focuses on exceptions, and those exceptions are usually negative. If we do the same for social media, it doesn't get much better, actually. We can add to that feel ugly, lonely, and even sick. And to be honest, that's also not really surprising. But it's really important to realize that these social media platforms, they are designed to make us addicted. I like to compare it a little bit to what sometimes, I don't know, have you ever eat crisps and try to eat not too many, just 1 or 2 crisps? It's basically impossible. Well, the crisp manufacturers and social media platforms, they basically trigger our brain's reward system, where it releases a little bit of dopamine, and which makes us coming back for more. The ingredients that are being used by the crisp industry is salt and fats and sugar, and social media uses likes, loves, wows, and those notifications. Anything to just keep us consuming, whether that's crisps or the social or news feed. And actually, when we think about this, has a lot of impact on us, on all of us. And that is because these news and social media stories, they do not just merely reflect the reality, but they act as amplifiers, magnifying select narratives. So about 10 years ago, I thought, what if we shift the focus in narrative? And what if we start embracing the power of storytelling to have a positive impact? And I was convinced that passion and brilliant creative solutions and happiness and kindness and courage and love are also ingredients to make something go viral. And that's what I did. I wanted to test this. Was I just assuming this, or does it really work? So a little bit more than 9.5 years ago, I started BrightVibes. And BrightVibes, what we do is we amplify the good in the world, and we do this by telling and publishing contagiously inspiring stories, which are mainly video stories, where we feature amazing people and organizations that work really hard every day to make our planet a kinder, a more sustainable, and a happier place. And we do this from the profound belief that most people want to do better. They want to better themselves, they want to help and do better for other people, and in the end, we all care about the planet as well. We want to care, we want to do better for everything that lives. And over the years, we have featured hundreds of amazing, impactful people and organizations, and we've inspired tens of millions of people to actually take positive action by sharing these stories on our social media and on our website. And I'm going to give you 3 examples. But before I do that, I've got this slide. When we tell these stories, we use sort of like a formula, and that formula consists of the 3 H's. It is about telling stories where we touch people's hearts. So we want to provoke emotion and touch people's hearts so they open up their heads for new ideas, and we give them concrete suggestions on what they can now do so they can get their hands moving. And I'm going to share 3 examples with you. The young man that you see here is Bas, and he's the founder of an NGO, a non-profit organization in the Netherlands. And he started that organization after the father of a very close friend of his died, who lived on the street, and he died of hypothermia. It was so cold that that friend's father died. And Bas studied fashion design, so he was thinking, you know, what can I do? What can I do to help? So he came up with this idea of these shelter suits. And what these shelter suits are, they're very sturdy, very strong, very warm jackets. But they're not just jackets. You can also turn them into a sleeping bag, as you can see. You can also turn it into a sleeping bag. So at least vulnerable people who live on the streets or refugees who live under terrible circumstances can at least have a little bit of warmth. We featured, he looks like one of the students actually. He has a very young-looking face. The guy you see here with the ukulele, that is Marijn. And Marijn studied psychology. And he's just a very happy character. If you think I'm a positive guy, well, wait till you meet Marijn. He will blow me out of the water. And what Marijn does in his spare time, he gives lessons at primary schools. And he gives lessons that are, I think, maybe one of the most important lessons that are just not being taught. So he gives happiness lessons. And he does this for free. And it was amazing to be filming there in that classroom. And the third story, and this is all, it's just a tiny little selection. What you see here are sandals, but these are not normal sandals. These are sandals created by an American non-profit, Because International, and it's the product, the shoes are called the shoe that grows. And they're very sturdy, very strong, durable sandals that can expand 5 sizes. You might think, who wants that? Why do we need that for? Well, in the world, there are 300 million children who cannot even afford shoes, which causes all sorts of problems, not being able to go to school or getting all sorts of diseases. I hope that you can notice that I love talking about this. Cesar already mentioned it. I can go on for hours, and I've got so many stories to tell. But there's another really important question that we have to, basically you should ask me, or I have to ask myself, and that is, did it actually really work? Because I enjoyed it, and the people I created this with had a great time. But did we really touch people's hearts? And did we open up their heads for new ideas? And did we get these hands moving? I think that is the most important thing. Well, I wouldn't be standing here if the answer was no, so that's a little bit predictable. And you don't need to read the screenshots here. I'll just go by them one by one. Shelter suit. So the video that we made of Shelter Suit got 11 million views. And by the way, we have most of our audience, I don't know how that happened, but it happened on Facebook. And we have an English and a Dutch and a Spanish and a German language Shelter Suit. They received tens of thousands of donations in euros in donations from our followers. But as we also publish in English, and we have a huge audience in the US, 55% of our followers are in the US. Ashton Kutcher, the actor, he shared this video. And after sharing that video, Bas was invited to go and set up Shelter Suits New York. And he now also produces shelter suits and he distributes them in Cape Town as well. The happiness lessons. Marijn made these happiness lessons as a PDF. He made them available to download online so other teachers can also teach these happiness lessons. And he did that in 2 languages. He made them available in Dutch and in English. And our community translated it to 7 languages. And there were 30,000, at least 30,000 downloads of the course. So there are hundreds of thousands of children who've been taught about happiness. And it even inspired some people who no longer were in teaching to go back to teaching again. And the shoe that grows, again, they got tens of thousands of euros in donations, but it wasn't people just clicking and giving money. There were also people that actually bought boxes of these shoes and brought them themselves to children, street kids in Nigeria and in other African countries. So, again, I mean, it's just a tiny little selection. It was so difficult to make these choices. I could have shown so much more. And as I am basically always surrounded by these type of amazing people, I sometimes get asked, don't you look at the world through pink glasses? Don't you think that everything is just fine? And aren't you telling us all to just only watch inspiring or positive news? Well, the answer to that is, of course, I do not. I do not recommend that. It's really important to be aware of the issues that we all have to deal with. That's why I started BrightVibes in the first place. However, what I hope to have achieved today is to make you all a little bit more aware of your own media diet and how important it is to not just accept what's on the standard menu, but to handpick media that are good for you, because we become what we eat, we become what we read, and we also become our social feed. So we better make it a healthy one. And by doing so, I promise you, it will not only make you feel better, it will make us all do better. Thank you.